No, I have not.
Cheryl Littlefield? Cheryl Littlefield? I'm trying to embarrass you. If you would pause the check-in process, and if you would all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the 2024 Madison School District Deliberative Session. My name is George Epstein. I'm your moderator. I did not believe in 1986 I would ever say welcome to the 2024 Madison School District meeting. Just this all effective. Two things I'd like to point out. One is that I did not sign up to be moderator again. It's really my hope that someone would like to step into this role. I would really help them all I possibly could on the ballot for the town meeting, but they could really use an additional moderator, someone who has some experience doing it. Last year I was too ill to do the town meeting, and an individual was pressed into service, so it would be very, very nice to do that. To have someone else step into that role, and if you would like to let us know, Jim Curran, myself, we'd be happy to serve as your campaign manager and get the write-in ballots signed in. You could do as well as Joe Biden as a write-in candidate. That was number one. Number two is even more challenging, which is that we've had a whole bunch of years of service from Pat Ambrose, who has been the clerk for the school district and really does a wonderful job. She's accurate, she's complete, the minutes are on target, she just keeps us all out of trouble, and she's a very nice person to work with. But she's smarter than I am. She's done. She's just brilliant. So I'm going to ask you to do two things. One is to think about who you might encourage to serve as the school district clerk, and speak to Jim Curran, speak to the superintendent of schools, and let them know of your interest in that. That would really be wonderful. And the other thing I'm going to ask you to do is to all join me in standing and giving a round of applause to Pat. She's done a terrific job. And I would make you give a speech, but I know you wouldn't want to do that. We are here for a deliberative session. The school district of Madison is an SB2 form of government, as opposed to the traditional town meeting of the town meeting form of government. And the SB2 form of government calls for this meeting, the deliberative session, to essentially vote on and confirm or amend or modify the warrant that the school board and petitioners have put together that will appear for the March 12th voting. And in this situation, we don't make final decisions, yay or nay, on the items on the warrant. We simply decide what will appear on the ballot for voting on March 12th. So we have the opportunity to, in some cases, in most cases, but not all, we have the opportunity to amend the items that are on the warrant. We certainly have an opportunity to ask questions and challenge and make suggestions with regard to the items that are on the warrant. But the power of this group is specifically the power to amend or modify the terms, the language, the numbers that are in the warrant articles. If you suggest modifying a warrant article in a way that's not permissible, the format of the article or whatever is not something that can be modified, I'll give you an explanation and we will hear from an attorney if we need to. But our purpose here tonight is to decide what will appear on the ballot on March 12th for the whole town to have an opportunity to vote on. Before we go barreling into that role, I'm going to ask Tino Fernandez, the chair of the Advisory Budget Committee, to introduce his squad. There is a microphone over there, and given that we're recording this, it would probably be best, right?
I'm Tino Fernandez, the chair for this year.
It's not working quite enough.
How about now? Working now? Not working at all?
And the buttons.
There you go.
Now, it might need a little bit more muscle, so we're going to see what we can do. But if you speak loudly, we'll probably get through the introduction.
All right, so Doug McAllister, Ned Rogerson, and we're missing Joe Dane and Sharon Schilling, who are not here tonight, and our alternate is Joy Gray. Also on the committee is Sarah DiMartino, who's with the school committee, and John Arruda is not here tonight.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask Jim Curran, the chair of the school board, to introduce the squad on this entire side.
So to my left, we have Pat Ambrose, the school district clerk. Myself, Jim Curran. To the right of me is Ed Robinson, Jeremy Cox, Sarah DiMartino, Dr. Michael Whalen, superintendent of schools, business administrator for SAU 13, Heather Sherwood, principal Heather Woodard, special services director Lisa Dubois, IT director Luke Bergeron, and attorney Hadi Grandy.
Good, thank you. These folks are privileged to have been elected and put into these positions or hired for these positions, but your voice is the most important voice here. This is the school district meeting, and it's your decision making that determines the outcome of this meeting. The process for a deliberative session is pretty simple, but if you have any questions about how to manage things during the course of the evening here, the very last printed page in your book, just inside the cover, is the town and school meeting procedures. I'm not sure why there's a big $ sign in the middle of it, but that started a few years ago. It probably has something to do with my pay level. And you do have the freedom to review that and consider any aspect of it. If you have a problem with any ruling that I make, simply stand up and say, including interrupting people, simply say, point of order, Mr. Moderator, and we will listen to you, and you have the opportunity to overrule me. You can simply make a motion that says, what you're doing, Mr. Moderator, I don't like, and I'd like the town to overrule that. If you don't overrule me, we follow these rules, and that keeps us relatively well organized. So if you'd all join me on page 2 of your books, you see the school warrant articles for 2024, and this is what we're looking to pin down to make sure we control what's on the ballot for March 12th. And you'll see that the first session of the annual meeting is described there. That's what we're here at, the deliberative session. And the second session of the meeting is described and refers to as voting on the official ballot. And you'll note that it is March 12th, the 12th day of March 2024 here where that voting will occur. And then Article 1 simply lists the positions that are open for election, and we don't do anything about that here at this meeting, since that is statutorily determined. But we're ready to get started with Article 2. And what I'll do is read Article 2, but we won't make a motion, because we're not putting it on the floor to decide it one way or the other. If you want to make a motion to amend this article, you have the right and power and authority to do that. But I'm simply going to read the article, open it up for discussion and possible amendment. So here we go. Article 2, shall the school district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session, that's us, for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $7,110,576, and that is in fact the number. That question mark, I guess, is the way that sentence should end. There we go. Okay, I guess that's the explanation. That number, the school board that's what they're going with. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $7,020,176, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. The school board recommends this appropriation 400. The budget committee does recommend this appropriation 700. I'm going to start the discussion on this article by recognizing Chairman Curran, who will give you a little bit of a description of where that number came from.
Thank you. All right, so we've talked about this, we've gone through the budget time after time. The big changes that you'll see in the budget this year, we are removing a 0.5 teaching position, so 0.5 FTE teaching position. We are removing a 1 full-time equivalent paraprofessional. In the custodial section, we have gone from a 0.5 FTE custodian to a full-time position. The FICA is about $3,000 up. The health stipend is about $2,500 down. Health insurance overall, I know there's been a lot of talk about this, was a $44,000 increase. We did add $50,000 to the budget this year for the playground. It was brought up here last year as to why we hadn't done that, so we opted to put that in the budget here. The Conway numbers are down by just short of $50,000, and that includes the tuition for the middle school, high school, and the Conway bond. Our special ed out-of-district tuition is down just shy of $600,000, but our transportation for some of that special ed is up about $175,000. So that's kind of the big changes in all. All in all, it's about a $329,000 decrease from last year's budget.
And if you turn to page 32, we have typically used this summary format to review the changes year in, year out, and to ask questions, to focus questions. Now, there are more detailed breakdowns of the expenditures in the book, but this is sort of a middle ground. Rather than just look at the very bottom line number, this is an opportunity to look at where some of the changes are. You recognize that, I guess very roughly, half of the budget goes to the town of Conway for educating our 7th through 12th graders. We've got our K through 6th graders here, and the payments to Conway are done under the Conway contract, the sending contract. So the floor is open. If you would go to that microphone, if you have questions or comments, concerns, or amendments you would like to make, since you are free to do any of those things. The budget committee can chime in at any time. I don't necessarily invite you, but you won't be shy if you have comments you'd like to share. I'm going to stand here because this is a lot of money. So to give people an opportunity to think about it a little bit longer. So if there's no discussion, or when we're finished with discussion on a particular item, I will simply declare that the ballot on March 12th will have this warrant article as printed in the book, or as modified if we did have an amendment. So I'm about to do that. Then I will. I hereby declare that Article 2 shall appear on the ballot as shown in your book, and we will have the opportunity to vote on that on March 12th. Article 3, and just so everybody knows, I think people recognize, but under the SB2 format, as the article describes, if the article is voted no, then the smaller number, in this case it's a smaller number, of the $7,020,000 will be the budget, it's called the default budget, and will be the budget that the school district will operate under, unless, as it further describes here, the school board calls for a special town meeting to further discuss it and perhaps pursue a second try at a different number. So, Article 3, shall the voters of the Madison School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,331,961 for the 24-25 school year, in which $467,389 is assigned to the school budget of this district. The school board recommends this appropriation 310. The budget committee does recommend this appropriation 502. I assume the two are abstentions. If you turn to the next page, this year's adjusted budget of $1,055,505, which is the default budget, with $369,275 assigned to the school district budget, will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the district voters voting in this administrative unit. So what that means is that Freedom and Tamworth will vote on this the same day we do, on March 12th, and it's the combined vote of the three communities that will determine whether this passes or doesn't pass. That's how it works. And they will all have precisely this article on their warrant, because you can't change it. We can't change it here because we all three towns have to vote on the same thing. So the SAU school board, which is the combined school board of the three towns, determines these numbers and puts them on the warrant, and this is the unmodifiable warrant article, because all three towns have to vote on precisely the same thing, and it's the combined vote that will determine whether it passes or not. And you'll notice it's a big difference this year between the proposed budget of $1,331,000 and the default budget on the next page of $1,055,000, and there's a reason for that. And Mr. Curran will share his thoughts, or anybody's thoughts about it.
So the big difference there is $250,000 for the SAU to operate its own preschool program. And that $250,000, of which about $85,000 is assigned to the town of Madison, will be to educate the preschool children who we're currently sending to out-of-district placements. And I'm going to push down Dr. Whalen or Lisa Dubois to answer this. Please.
So, I guess you have the better mic. I don't know. It's all right.
You're okay. Speak up, though.
I'm used to it. All right. So, yes, we're offering a preschool program this year on the warrant, and that is having a preschool program in SAU 13 is not new. It's not unique. We used to have a program in Freedom that ended in 1920. Excuse me, 2019. Thank you. I got my team up here.
I was here then.
Yes. Can I have that mic? Maybe that's going to help me out. Let's do that.
Yeah, my first year.
I appreciate it. That's better. Thank you. All right, so as I was saying, our program at SAU 13 and Freedom, 2019-2020 was the last year of that program. We've had that program in Freedom. It was a successful program. The reason why that program ceased to exist is that one district was holding the financial responsibility of the entire program. So what we've done is house that under the SAU umbrella and build it out by apportionment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the number side of things and talk about Madison. So Jim already mentioned, so Madison's apportionment to the SAU is 35.49%. The share of Madison's contribution to the program based on that $250,000 cost to start up the program would be $88,725. Now when we remove those one-time expenditures, things that are, we need new supplies, there's some playground that needs to be in place, those initial startup costs. We're projecting the cost of the program to run at $138,629, which would, in year 2, bring that share of the budget for Madison down to $49,199. We're doing a 5-day-a-week program with a half-day option for kids. This is about giving families options. This really is about, we're not saying that every kid has to come to the program. We're certainly encouraging it. We're not, certainly don't want to be antagonistic to our fellow preschool providers that we have out there servicing our students right now. But what we're doing right now is not sustainable, and we need to think differently. It would be a well spent investment to have a preschool program and the suggested, I don't know if I mentioned this, it would be in Madison Elementary. So the program would be housed here in Madison. And we just have to think differently. We can't sustain this. Currently, just to give you some figures of where we've been, last year on preschool costs, Madison spent $87,000. To date, we are at, for this fiscal year, we are at $63,000. So we need to think differently in order to meet the needs of our students. Part of the reason why Madison is a great location is it's central. Again, this is about providing our students the best possible options, and we're confident that Madison can do that.
Just so I have it clear, the budget we just agreed to have on the warrant, Article 2, contains funding associated with the continuing out-of-district placements if Article 3 was defeated.
Yeah, George, you're correct. So in the Madison budget currently, we have the preschool costs that we're currently paying in that budget now. Because if this warrant article were to be defeated, we obviously need to provide services for those students that are currently in out-of-district placements for preschool.
And so it would be reasonable for taxpayers to assume that if Article 3 passes, there'll be some return of funds from Article 2, since it's really in both places.
Absolutely, you're correct. It's similar to what we did with the BCBA position, that we were outsourcing that through a contract with an outside company, and we brought that in-house and we're able to spread that back to the taxpayers.
Any further discussion? Again, we can't amend it, but you certainly can ask questions or make comments. Yes, please go to the microphone and introduce yourself. I know who you are.
Good evening, Don Bayu. Is there a
Can you make sure the button's on, pushed upward? So it should be on the side, up higher up. Somewhere there's a button. You used to be involved with a technology company that used to.
Hey.
Okay.
You mentioned that there's a full half-day option. Is there a full-day option?
Yes, it would be a full day and half. It would be an AM session. The program right now would be about 2.5 hours a day, and then with a full day option as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
There is on. We had 2 abstentions, and I'm going to give this to Doug, who's one of the abstaining members, so I'd like everybody to hear why.
Thank you.
So I abstained along with Sharon only because the school board voted 3-1-0, and we asked at the time what the one negative vote was about, and the school board could not tell us the reason for that. So Sharon and I voted to abstain because we didn't know why someone on the school board would vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, why don't we, if you could wait 1 second, why don't we find out?
Yeah, so Ed Robinson, I was the one that voted against it. I have a couple thoughts. One, I think it personally should be larger, which may not be popular, but I have a hard time not offering it to all. We are limited to class size because we won't have enough physical space. And I think it was kind of formulated while we were doing the budget, so it's kind of like building the house and drawing the plans as you're putting it together. So to me, if it came to me a couple months earlier, I would have voted for it, but I'd also personally like to see it bigger so we can offer it to more people.
And who would not have it offered to them that you would like to see it offered to?
So it's an integrated, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be integrated, so it's designed to service a special ed as well as a regular, but we're constrained by 20.
49% will be the max for
Right, but the physical number of students we can have is 27.
Ideal would be 24, but we could go up to 27.
Right, so I'm thinking 3, 4, 5-year-olds, there's more than 24 or 25 in the 3 towns.
And the intent is for it to be roughly 50-50 kids with
Right,
special education needs.
to assist with the special ed, costing, but for me, you're gonna run a point where people can't get access to it, so how do you pick? I would like to see it open to more, but I don't know if that's even possible, so that's why I voted against it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Bill Dempster. I have a question, Mr. Moderator, regarding the actual program itself. And the question is, does the state require by law for us to have a preschool program?
I know the answer, but I'll let you answer that, Mr. Superintendent. The answer is no. That's a short answer.
No.
But let's be clear. There's no specific requirement for a preschool program, but there is a requirement that we meet the special education IEPs, the individual education plans of students in special education. And that starts at what age?
3.
At 3.
So it's okay. I just wanted to know because I started looking to see if there were requirements, and it seemed to me, and I don't know if the other people in town, there seemed to be more of a want than a need. And let me bring that up. Let me clarify that, because of what's going on in town right now with our other budget items. This is not something little chump change, and this is a big step for town. And if you look at the demographics in town with regards to medium income, and you look at the age in town, there's getting to be an older population who may be on fixed incomes. And I think the numbers that were thrown out, because I did get a chance to look at the meeting that the superintendent held with regards to what it was going to cost us. And it seemed to be a big expense for about 20 to 24 students in town. So I just wanted to, let folks be aware that's the things that we're going to be looking at, because I just retired, so I'm on a fixed income. And you start looking at those things. And, $20 here and $50 here suddenly add up to, a budget where at a home budget we could be looking at an additional $200 or $300 with all the items going on in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, would you argue that given our legal obligation to provide services to kids with IEPs, you would argue this was the more cost-effective approach?
Absolutely, George. Thank you for that. Yeah, so currently, based on what we're spending, last year we spent, I just want to reiterate this point, last year we spent, just on preschool services, we spent $87,706. And the program in year 1, which is the biggest investment, is $88,000. So we're seeing those costs climb. Kids are coming into our school systems with a greater need. The benefits to this program as well is that not only does it would service students that are identified special ed, it would also allow for our typical peers, those that are not identified, and we would be able to get an earlier look at those students and prevent interventions, put interventions in place that would possibly prevent long-term needs for special ed. With the research states clearly that the biggest return on investment is early education. We need to get to kids while they're learning to read, not reading to learn. And for every dollar that we spend on early ed, you're going to get $7 back. And we have a number of, Jim mentioned this earlier in the operating budget, we have a number of out-of-district placements right now, and having a program like this that is going to allow us to get our students in the pipeline earlier, in-house, is going to be a great shot in the arm for our district to get to our students.
But this will be an issue that in years 2, 3, and 4 of the program, it will start to become clear as to whether we're really gaining those benefits.
Absolutely, and that there is an initial cost because there's a startup with the program because it hasn't run in so long. But yes, you're absolutely right, George. So yes, and that cost we imagine will also decrease.
You have to call me Mr. Moderator here?
Sorry, Mr. Moderator. I apologize.
You don't want to annoy me, I'm just saying. That's not
True
a good
enough.
idea. Yes.
So the other thing that just needs to be made clear is the special ed portion of this program is paid for by the district. The regular ed or regular ed peers would be pay for play. So it would be a paid program for those. So it is not a free preschool program for all. What's that?
Yeah. Thank you. Good point. Well, we can't modify it. Are there further comments on Article 3? Yes, sir.
Robert Dubois. It might not be just on Article 3. So several years ago, I put something to the school board. When we looked at the statistics of the special needs program, so to speak, we saw that the ratio of students that we had here in Madison was quite high. And I had put out a request that we needed to contact both the state and the federal government to look at what the subsidy was that we were getting here in Madison, because our ratio of students that were requiring this extra special needs training, we weren't getting compensated enough from the state and the federal government. So I'd like to know a status on that. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, because we're usually out of town.
Somebody want to speak to that without getting as political as I would and commenting on it?
I'm not familiar with that request, but I can state that once our students reach, once our students that are placed, or any student, it's called special ed aid, and we would get that money back from the state once they hit a certain cap. So we would get that back in special ed aid, but I could look, I'd be happy to talk with you after this to see if we could provide you additional information.
Do you have an overall percentage of the portion of the special ed costs over and above the per capita for non-special ed student? What portion of that is paid for by the state or the feds? Do you have a number?
It changes every year.
It does, but yep, you can think about it for a while or just ignore me. Those are your options.
We don't have that on hand, Mr. Moderator. We will.
Okay, all right. You're ignoring me? Is that? Oh, okay. That was a point of order. Let's overrule the moderator and just ignore him. Okay. I don't really mind that much. If there's no further discussion on Article 3, I will state that Article 3 will appear on the warrant as written in your book. Article 4. To see if the Madison School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the previously established Special Ed Capital Reserve Fund. The school board recommends this appropriation 400. The Budget Committee does recommend this appropriation 700. Do you have any comments? This is in line with other warrant articles in the past.
Yes, so the $30,000 would get us roughly to the $200,000 number that we had put out there years ago and said that that's where we'd like to cap out at. We do have a special ed need this year that looks like a potential of tapping for roughly $60,000 out of this fund now. So that would just help to replenish said fund.
Thank you. Any discussion with regard to Article 4? Seeing none, we'll place Article 4 on the warrant as printed in the book. Article 5, to see if the Madison School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be placed in the previously established Building Capital Reserve Fund. The school board recommends this appropriation 400. The Budget Committee does recommend this appropriation 700. Again, nothing too shocking there, but anything you want to comment on, school board? If not?
Nope. One of the things that we are doing is there will be an upgrade to the HVAC system here in the gymnasium this year. Most of the monies for that are coming out of the ESSER 3 grant from the federal government, but the overruns in the timing and COVID and getting everything, the cost went up. So we will be tapping this capital reserve account for roughly $90,000 this year to finish that project.
Are there any comments or questions with regard to Article 5? Seeing none, Article 5 will appear on the warrant as written in the book. Article 6, I'm going to just read it off to see if the Madison School District votes to raise and appropriate sum of up to $50,000 to be placed in the previously established Building Capital Reserve Fund, with such amount to be funded from the June 30th unreserved fund balance. School Board recommends this appropriation 400. The Budget Committee does recommend this appropriation 700. And they are related, Articles 5 and 6. Mr. Chairman, would you like to comment?
So this second one, the first one, Article 5, is to raise and appropriate the funds. The Article 6 is up to $50,000 from unreserved fund balance. So if we get to the end of the year and we do have a unreserved fund balance, this would allow us to put up to $50,000 of that into the building capital reserve account. So rather than turning it back to the town, it would be putting it into the fund.
Just to be clear, Article 5, the $50,000, in most years that would come out of taxation. We would pay taxes for that $50,000. This year, most of that would be reimbursed by federal funds, the one-time sort of COVID funds that are in Article 5. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
No.
I thought you just said
Article 5 funds the capital reserve account for the building. We are going to be tapping the capital reserve account for $90,000. We're going to be withdrawing upwards of $90,000.
I thought you mentioned Ezra, I can't remember the abbreviation, but the federal funds, and they are not subsidizing Article 5.
They are not subsidizing Article 5. They are doing the bulk of the project.
Over and above.
The capital reserve account will be funding upwards of $90,000.
And we don't need to raise and appropriate those funds.
Because they have already been raised and appropriated. We will hold a public hearing prior to expending said funds.
Gotcha. So over and above what the feds are giving us, we will pay taxes of $50,000 to go into the fund in Article 5. Article 6, we've already paid taxes in this year, and if we have funds left over from those taxes, rather than return them to the taxpayers, they would go into that fund because it needs more money.
Correct.
That's what Article 6 is. Any further discussion or questions? I do ask some of these questions for your benefit. If I'm wasting your time, I apologize. I actually know some of the answers to them. He just makes stuff up anyway, so it doesn't really. Any other comments, questions with regard to Article 6? Seeing none, Article 6 will appear on the warrant as printed in your book. Article 7. To see if the school district will vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund and to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be placed in this fund. Further, to name the Madison School Board as agents to expend from said fund. The school board recommends this appropriation 400. The Budget Committee does not recommend this appropriation 340. I think before we just dive into discussing it, I believe the school board would like to propose an amendment to this, or actually a restatement of Article 7. So why don't you go for it?
Okay, so I will make a motion.
Yes.
To amend this article to read, to see if the Madison School District will vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund and to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in this fund. Funds will be used towards the abatement of lead and towards either the restoration of the building or its demolition as determined by the town. Further, to name the Madison School Board as agents to expend from said fund.
Is there a second to that motion to amend? Yes, thank you. And you have voted to approve your own motion, I assume. Is it unanimous?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And has the Budget Committee had the opportunity to comment on this one or make a recommendation?
We have some, the basic votes against this were based on the principle of putting the cart before the horse in this case. And we were reluctant to fund any reserve fund without a specific reason for the fund, whether we're going to tear it down or build it, and without specific numbers as to what it's going to cost. And we had some vague numbers of originally $100,000 to tear down the building, but that got dropped to about $50,000, which sounded more reasonable. And then a number of $400,000 to restore the building or whatever. So I think the taxpayers should have a clear picture of what they want to do. Do they want to tear this building down? And what is that going to cost? And if they want to save the building, we need a number, and I think most of the taxpayers would not like a number of $400,000. That sounds like you could build a very nice house for that number, and we should have some real numbers that are out there before we make that decision and create a trust fund. That was the reason the majority voted against. If anyone on the Budget Committee would like to explain why they voted for it.
Well, I have a specific question, and that is whether you have had the opportunity to review the amended language and whether you have voted on it one way or the other.
We have not had the opportunity to review the amended language, and we have not voted on that. But I think we would probably still vote the same because it's the principle of how this is being presented, not the amount of money that's being asked for.
I'd just like to observe that there are two significant differences between the amended article, which we've not voted on yet. We have to vote here to decide whether to accept that amendment or not. One is to cut the dollar amount in half from $50,000 to $25,000. A big difference in addition is that in your book you will see that near the end of the article, further to name the Madison School Board as agents to expend from said fund. That would mean that $50,000, if Article 7 was passed as it is in your book, that $50,000 could be spent by the school board at their own discretion at any time. That they are the agents to expend, and they'd be able to decide, well, we're going to tear it down and dig up the dirt with the lead in it and so on. Under the revised language, the amount is reduced from $50,000 to $25,000, but it's specific that it's going to go into a capital reserve fund where there are no agents to expend, which means that the money will accumulate in a town. I'm sorry, I did not catch it. I apologize. I should have had it in front of me. Well, then this makes no sense to me. Okay, so the middle sentence, I paid attention, but not long enough. So the middle sentence says, funds will be used towards the abatement of lead and towards either the restoration of the building or its demolition as determined by the town. That would come back to the school district. Further, to name the Madison School Board as agents to expend from said fund, which directly contradicts it and says you can do it whenever you want. You don't have to come back to the town. So it strikes me, Attorney Huddy, who has the coolest name of any attorney we've worked with over the years, and I apologize, that's not your last name. I can call you Huddy? Okay. So I don't like this. What do you think of this? You probably think it's wonderful because you probably helped draft it.
It just depends on the will of the voters.
I'm sorry, we've got to get you a microphone there.
This is really I can talk really loudly too. I have a very loud
Well, we
voice.
want to record it for posterity here as well.
Right. This is really a decision for the voters. what they want to have happen before money is expended. So either or.
You don't find the language contradictory, though, as determined by the town, and then name the school board as agents to expend?
Well, it is a bit contradictory. So, you know, when I read as determined by the town, I mean, that really is one thing. And also to have the school board as agents to expend, it does give them the right to spend that money at any time at their discretion, so long as it's within the purpose outlined in the article.
Could you just say on the record that the moderator's right?
You need me to.
No, that would be too much to ask for. I don't expect that.
It's certainly amendable.
Okay, yes, good, thank you. Yes?
Michael Brooks, Go Hill Road. I think, as I understand with the way that the chairman read it, it sounds like an acknowledgement that they have to deal with the lead situation whichever way this body decides to go with the building, whether it be saved or demolished. So that's the way that I understood it. So the $25,000, it sounds like they might think that can deal with the lead in the soil whichever way we go.
Can you do anything with $25,000? You need 50 grand, don't you, to do anything?
So to demolish the building and fix the land and everything around it to bring it back to clean would be roughly $50,000. So it would be over 2 years. And the intention behind this was that we listed as a committee, discussed it and brought it back to the board, which was to list the purpose of the warrant article, which was for the lead abatement, demolish, or renovate, whichever the town decides, basically in Article 7, or Article 8, I'm sorry. And then it leaves the boards as agents to expend. And the reason that we had discussion about this was that if let's say Article 8 was to pass, and we are to surplus the building and remove it or demolish it at the end of this year for next year, we could do that project this summer or fall, whichever would work. If the board is not agents to expend the fund to make that happen, we'd wait until town meeting next year to get a vote to expend the funds from the capital reserve account.
If you did it this summer, how would you know what the town wanted, whether to demolish or to reconstruct?
If Article 8 passes or fails, that would be a driver.
Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, Bill Dempster, Doe Drive. I have a question maybe for somebody that may be in the audience here. I understand there's an initiative in town with regards to the Historical Society looking to do something. And I'm not gonna say what, but it's up to so there also was talk about looking for potential private funding because this was some type of historic building. If that's the case, I would agree with the chairman of the budget committee. They were sort of putting the cart before the horse, where we may be able to get in whether it's through federal grant money, historical money, some type of other funding, rather than this falls on the back of the taxpayers. So if there's somebody here from the Historical Society, you're from the Historical Society too?
Historical Society, but I'm working with them, so I can answer.
Is there some? I don't mean to disrespect. Is there someone else that can talk about that?
There are.
Okay,
If you
please
want
do.
me to speak, then that's up to you.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I sit on the committee to save the little red schoolhouse, as it was called, but the Madison Corner Schoolhouse. And the funds, my initial discussion with the people from the Historical Society and the other people on the committee, when we first saw a number of roughly $400,000 to renovate the building and bring it up, I looked at and said, okay, as a school district, if we were to demolish the building and remove it off the property, it's gonna cost us, at that point, the number that was given to us was $100,000. So I said, we'll put the $100,000 up from the town, which is what it would cost us to get rid of said building, and then the rest of funds would come from private funding or fundraising and or grant funds. So it's not that we're going to plan to come back to the town and say, now we have a full plan, it's gonna cost another $300,000 to the town to do it. It would be through fundraising, grant funding, and private donation.
Thank you. Yes? One second, go ahead.
Tammy Flanagan. I'm also serving on that Madison Corner Schoolhouse Committee that has been tasked by the school board to look at this question. And so we had started meeting. We have met with the Historical Society. We have met with Friends of the Library just to get ourselves set up in a nonprofit status, and we have just begun our work. So part of the beginning of that work was to create this capital reserve fund to put some money aside, because we knew there was going to be some money needed for the lead abatement and whatever comes next. And we were just starting our work looking for grant money, looking for interest in this project, when we were kind of surprised with Article 8 that kind of came up to, which was the petition warrant article that said that we would look at either selling it or demolishing it. So what as a committee, we weren't trying to put any cart before the horse. We were just getting our work started, starting this capital reserve. That money would go in to the capital reserve that we knew we would start saving and start fundraising. And now we're kind of pushed into coming to moving things a little quicker than we had intended. We don't have the answers right now. We're just started our work. We don't know what to say as far as what the town's going to want to do with this building. We had just started some social media. We wanted to get some feedback. We've got a lot of positive feedback from that so far, people who are interested in seeing the building restored, but we don't know if that's going to be what the town's going to ultimately vote for. But we are asking, I'm asking, our committee would like to continue our work. We would like to see where this could go. The town has moved this building a few times. They put a lot of money into moving it, to put it in a better position, to use it in a variety of different ways. We'd like to see if there's another purpose, another life for this building. We think there could be, but we don't have the answers for you right now. We're hoping that we have the time, that you could give us the time, one more year or so, to just come up with these answers, to come up with a plan, to come up with the numbers, to do the fundraising and all of that. And before we, the building's been here. It's one of the 3 historic buildings in town that the town owns, and it's been here for 185 years. If you could just give us another year before we decide to demolish it or sell it off or whatever could be done. So that's kind of the way things have transpired for now.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on that committee. Mr. Raj?
It's on. Problem I had with this also was timing. We're told sort of the initial estimate was $400,000, and I said, well, what are we going to do? Build a swimming pool inside it? Or is it just going to be a single-room schoolhouse that doesn't require as much finishing? So then the question comes, well, what is the remediation cost? And then I was under the understanding we were going to put a fence around it temporarily, at least, to prevent the kids from getting into the lead, and that made some sense. And then I asked about the roof, and I was told the roof is good. So if you put a fence around it to prevent the children from getting into the lead soil, which is absolutely something we should do, I think, we have some time. The paint job is not going to get it much worse in 1 year. And my thought was, we are rushing this thing. Article 8 is going to ask something of the voters where there's going to be no education, basically, about the pros and cons of it. And people are going to look at this and say, oh, I like the schoolhouse. We ought to save it. And they're going to have no idea of the expenses that we've been talking about or anything else. It's going to be an emotional issue. And then we're going to say, oh, because we had a vote, we've decided on what we're going to do. And I don't think that that's right either. I wanted to postpone this whole thing another year in order to allow for the education about whether it's a good idea, to figure out whether it's worth it. Is there a purpose for it? If we're going to build something and no one's going to use it, you sort of say, why bother? It does have a historical purpose. Maybe someone else would like it, who knows? I've seen up in Eaton that they moved a one-room schoolhouse and made a house out of it at one point, I think. We're pushing this so fast without anybody really understanding the pros and cons. That's my problem.
Thank you. Similar to Tammy, yes.
Cheryl Littlefield, and I've been around this town a long time. And when I first arrived, that little schoolhouse was over to the right-hand side of the school, and it was the town and school library. When they were going to rebuild and add on to the school, it was moved to the location it's in now, with a new foundation. That school has had, and I'm not sure how long since they've done it, but it used to be the third graders would dress up in colonial type clothes and go into that schoolhouse and reenact what it was like being in a classroom back in the 1920s or earlier. And I think it's also on the National Historic Register, if I recollect. And I just think it's a piece of history that it would be a shame for us to get rid of. And that's simply my personal opinion.
So we're confronted at the moment, thank you, with the motion to amend Article 7, and let's continue hearing from people.
Hi, Anna Gross. I just have a clarifying question, I guess, that I'd like to have covered. So if Article 7 does not pass, okay, are we not inevitably going to need money anyway? So let's say Article 8 is not, the decision is not made to demolish the building. Are we not still going to need money anyway to deal with the lead abatement? As a parent of a child that is at this school, I'd like a better assurance that something's going to happen rather than us wait another year or another year for better education of the future of the schoolhouse, but the lead abatement issue and the soil still remains. And so are we not inevitably going to need money for that one day, probably sooner rather than later before a decision is made whether we want to keep the schoolhouse or not?
Go ahead, Ben.
Okay, as one of the people that voted against this, we had a number of issues. One of which is we can't look at number 7 without looking at number 8. Is it possible for me to amend the amendment, or do we have to vote the amendment down before I put a new amendment on the floor?
You have to vote it down. Having multiple amendments on the floor at the same time is a way to drive everybody out of their
Yes,
minds.
all right. So that's what I thought. What I would like to do is vote
I'm
this.
sorry, it could either be voted in favor of or voted down, and you could still make another amendment.
What I would like to do is to vote this amendment down and then make a new amendment with similar language that says we will allocate the $25,000 for lead abatement, period. Nothing to do with what we're going to do with the building, whether we're going to keep it, whether we're going to demolish it, or whatever. That will give us the money to ameliorate that danger issue that's there. Secondly, I know that while the building is on the National Register of Historic Places, the fact that it is privately owned means that they can still do whatever they want with it. If it was in a historical district, they couldn't. But because it's not a historical district, they can do whatever they want with it. And one of the other reasons that I voted it down was I wasn't comfortable with the school committee being the agents to expend. I would like the town to be the agent to expend. There I am. So.
Well, you would not have any agent to expend. It would have to come back to the school district to make the final vote. So you wouldn't use the phrase agent to expend at all. And the reason I say that is because you are now going to write down what you'd like to have for your amendment, because we can't, I'll help, but you have to write it down. Yes. Actually, you could probably just do it from Article 7 as it's in there. You'd probably cheat and just cut and paste a little bit to that one. But, well, all right, and they're going to look for that. Well, they're scrambling a little bit. I just want to make a point that at a traditional town meeting, where we were the voters making the decision, we would probably have moved Article 8 in front of Article 7. We would have resolved yay or nay, Article 8, and we would then be in a better position to determine what Article 7 should look like. Because we are an SB2 town just for the school district, and that's something that you can reverse, we're not able to do it that way, and we are in this rather tricky situation of trying to walk into the voting booth on March 12th and determine, well, if I vote this way on this one, but the other one wins, what does that mean for voting the other one? It makes the decision-making process a more challenging process, if you think about it, as opposed to doing it in order as a group, all working together to resolve it. Before we do anything else, including taking up another amendment, which is perfectly appropriate, we should consider the school board's proposed amendment that's on the floor. And if you, is he the owner of it? And that's the only copy of it? That's tragic that we only have one copy of it. Do you have it electronically? Can you read it to us? Forget it. Here you go. Can we have? You can't use that piece of paper. Okay, here we go. So the article that we're, I'm sorry, I'm old and cranky. So Article 7, the amendment is as follows. We're going to vote yay or nay with regard to the amendment. To see if the Madison School District will vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in this fund. Funds will be used towards the abatement of lead and towards either the restoration of the building or its demolition as determined by the town. Further, to name the Madison School Board as agents to expend from said fund. So that's the amendment that is on the floor to be considered at this point. Is there any further discussion of that amendment? And once we resolve it, yay or nay, we have the opportunity to put another amendment on the floor. So all those in favor of the amendment as proposed by the school board, please raise your hand with your little piece of paper. Thank you. Whoop, let's try again. I'm going to start again. So you got your piece of paper. All those in favor of the amendment as proposed by the school board, please raise your hand. Thank you. Put your arms down. All those opposed to the amendment as proposed by the school board. So I believe the yeas have it. Anybody want to contest that? So the amended article now replaces the one that's in your book. The one I just read to you now replaces the one in the book. You have the opportunity, and we'll give them another minute, to consider an additional amendment or a new amendment to replace Article 7 as amended. If you'd all take a moment just to read Article 8 so that we're all familiar with that before we go barreling down the road of Article 8. And Attorney Huddy, just for confirmation purposes, as long as we stay with the topic of Article 8, even though it's been submitted by petition, this body has the opportunity to amend that article. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, and I would recommend doing so.
We'll get to that in a minute then. Thank you. I was thinking you might. Okay, so do we have some language here that we're pretty comfortable with? So remember what we have on the floor right now is the amended article. This is so much fun for moderators. I mean, I don't know how you guys are enjoying it. To see if the Madison School District will vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to be placed in the Madison Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund for the purpose of remediating the lead issue and to name the Madison School Board to expend said funds. To name the Madison School Board as the agent to expend those funds, that fund. Do I have a motion to put it on the floor and a second to put it on the floor? Thank you. Mr. Rogerson was the second. What's that? So Mr. is it McCullough? McAllister, I'm sorry, and Mr. Rogers are the makers and seconders. And you have the opportunity to speak first to it if you want to add anything else.
Well, as I said earlier, this sort of forces the issue of putting that money to do nothing more than lead abatement. And it doesn't talk about demolishing the schoolhouse, doing anything with it until we get further down the road and see how much it would cost and what this committee wants to do with it. So that.
Yes.
So that if the school board is engaged, they can only spend it on lead abatement.
To do the lead abatement, would you have to tear down or move the building? Okay. Well, they're going to do that anyway. Why don't you use the microphone?
I think there might be a slight problem in the way that is stated because we are adding the money to the Madison Corner Schoolhouse, but we have to establish it, don't we? The Madison Corner.
Yeah.
So that in order for that to be
To see if the Madison School District will vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund and to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in this fund. I should insert it for the purpose of remediating the lead issue, period. Further, to name the Madison School Board as the agents to expend from said fund. Okay. I think everyone understands that intent reasonably well. So we're yeah.
That means this fund is only for lead, if we want to do something else, we have to establish a fund. Will we modify it in the future?
Yeah, you've identified a specific fund purpose, and so it would be limited to just the purposes of remediating the lead issue. A reminder, attorney, if you change the purpose of the capital reserve fund, you need a 2/3 vote. Is that accurate? Attorney?
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you modify the purpose of a capital reserve fund, that requires a 2/3 vote of the body. Is that correct?
Well, you can't change the purpose here.
No, not today, but they're suggesting.
It has to be the same purpose, and also it can't be a different fund. So initially you had said that.
What you're saying is this is no good.
If I heard it correctly, which I was just trying to figure out if I heard it correctly.
You're right. See how easily I say you're right? You've got to be able to turn we have a warrant article here, and we can amend it a lot of ways, but we can't change the purpose of the fund, excuse me, the purpose of the warrant article, the purpose of the fund that's created in this warrant article. And so this is specific, well, I understand that, but you're also trying to restrict it to the lead issue.
Would you mind rereading it? Mr. Moderator, could you please reread it?
Well, I'm making it up as I read it, so be patient with me. To see if the Madison School District vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund. There's no other purpose mentioned so far, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in this fund. They want the phrase, the purpose of this fund is, or the purpose of these funds is to remediate the lead issue. And that's where the problem arises. Go ahead, Attorney Huddy.
I would say if it's quite clear that the purpose is for making the corner schoolhouse to be safer through lead abatement, it's somewhat different, but it's still related. And this article doesn't really have a purpose other than the schoolhouse, which is very broad. And so, clarifying that the purpose is safety measures.
You think that's okay?
I do think it's fine. I was initially alarmed because I thought it was a
understand.
allocating to a different fund, but
Yeah.
keeping the schoolhouse capital reserve fund as what's created, narrowing somewhat the purpose for the money, it's already quite broad, so I think it would be fine.
I'm going to suggest that your proposed amendment be exactly the same as Article 7 in your book with two changes. One is to change the $50,000 to $25,000. And the second is to insert a sentence after the phrase placed in this fund, and to insert the sentence, the funds will be used for the remediation of the lead issue. You don't have to say stuff like that. All it's going to do is annoy the Department of Revenue Administration.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, either way it's done, it limits the scope of what the money can be used for, which would be lead abatement. And then if we do the lead abatement and it's $12,000 and there's $13,000 left in the fund, we would then have to have a warrant article on a future year to dissolve the fund, returning the money to the taxpayer.
Now, I'm hoping that Attorney Huddy and I agree that what we're indicating is that the purpose that the purpose is for the corner schoolhouse capital reserve fund. That's the purpose, and that the funds raised this year will be used for remediating the lead. Something along those lines?
I don't quite agree. I think that if we put in, sorry, I saw that look.
I'm on your side.
So if we put in here for purposes, so capital reserve fund, raise and appropriate money to place in this fund for remediation of lead, that is the purpose at that point.
Which is a problem.
Which is now a problem. I think narrowing the scope of what this fund is used for is probably a good idea, but that is pretty narrow. So it
But
might be
wouldn't
too
the
narrow.
DRA object to that narrowing occurring here as a modification of that article? That seems to be a direct contradiction of their position.
It's very narrow. That would make it very narrow. Right now, the purpose of this article is to create a fund. The fund can be used for the Madison Corner Schoolhouse, I would assume, but really there's nothing here other than to create this fund. It doesn't direct.
So you don't think the DRA would have an objection to narrowing it as much as limiting it to lead remediation?
I think it is risky. I think that is.
Plus, it creates the problem Jim points out that we'd have to go back and undo it all.
Yeah, I think it is risky. But.
You have a suggestion, Mr. Brooks?
I have two.
One would be plenty.
The first, we could just trust our elected officials and ask them right here in this meeting to commit to not spending $25,000 on anything other than lead abatement next year. Number two, you could further the amendment on the floor, create a specific fund for lead abatement this year. So it could read the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Lead Abatement Capital Reserve Fund. And then whatever we decide with the petitioned article, we're not gonna have money to do anything this year, moving it, destroying it, refurbing it. We don't have the money. All we're gonna do is make a decision in the petitioned article, and you could create a different fund next year if that's the way you want to. I know what they intended to do was to name a fund this year, put a little bit of money into it, and add to it in the future. We've either got to trust them and move forward, or restrict this article and fund to just lead abatement and let's move on.
I agree. And I'm going to suggest the following to try and get this very simplified. I'm suggesting we leave Article 7 alone, with the exception of reducing it from 50,000 to 25,000, and that we have the minutes reflect the will of the town, and we'll have a separate little vote with a hand raised, that this, at least for the coming year, be limited to $25,000 solely for use by the, for the purposes of lead remediation, but not attempting to jam that into Article 7. That's what I would suggest you all have that level of trust, and the minutes will reflect that. That would get us out of here before midnight, which would be a good thing too. Well, I'm going to suggest, I'm going to ask that you two withdraw your amendment, and that we simply, Mr. Curran simply takes Article 7 and puts that on the floor with the number of $25,000 and nothing different. And then we'll have a separate vote to capture the will of the meeting as to whether we want to limit those funds to use of lead abatement. So would you like to put on the floor, assuming you're willing to withdraw your motion? Okay, and the second has been withdrawn. And so you're going to put on the floor, go ahead.
So I'm going to amend Article 7
Back to the original. Okay, back to the original
with the financial number of $25,000, and I will read it. To see if the Madison School District will vote to establish the Madison Corner Schoolhouse Capital Reserve Fund and to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in the fund. Further, to name the Madison School Boards as agents to expend from said fund.
Thank you. Is there a second to that? Thank you. Is there any further discussion? We will have another vote separate from that to talk about limiting it very quickly. We'll do that at the end. So is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of the amendment to go back to the original Article 7 at $25,000, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Motion passes. So the original article is back on the floor with $25,000 in place. Now I'm wondering if someone would be good enough to put a resolution on the floor to get a sense of the town that calls for the funds raised in Article 7, the minutes to reflect that the funds raised in Article 7 be limited to the purposes of lead remediation. So moved? And a second? Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Yes, sir.
I have a question. Is this a binding or non-binding resolution?
It's non-binding. We will have to vote them out of office to teach them a lesson if they ignore us. That's an accurate statement. They've been pretty well behaved over the years when we've done this. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
I have a question. If it might not make sense to request the budget committee to revote if they were so inclined to change their vote?
What?
The discussion that we've had, because it does make a difference.
Absolutely.
On a ballot vote.
What's the deadline for the recommendation from the budget committee to make it onto the ballot? Can anybody help me with that?
The ballot should be sent to the publisher probably tomorrow.
That's what I thought. So it's usually the day after this. So you guys might have to stick around tonight if you might, and the townspeople would probably like it if you thought about whether you wanted to back that recommendation or not. Thank you. Good point. That'll make a difference at the ballot box. Okay. Any further discussion of a motion that is the sense of the meeting that we would like the school board to limit the expenditure of the $25,000 to lead remediation? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Motion passes, and we have escaped that. Article 8, it is submitted by petition to instruct the Madison School District to declare the building known as the Madison Corner Schoolhouse as surplus, and following through with removal of the building from the Madison School District property, either through demolition or sale to include lead abatement from the area. Understand that this would also be advisory, and so voting it, and it's not up to us here tonight to decide whether to vote this up or down. It's not for us to decide whether we want to demolish or we want to do something else. The question becomes, do we want it to appear on the ballot as is shown here? And there is a problem with taking a petition article and just trying to kill it. You can't. You can fool with it, even fool with it extensively, and say, I don't know, you could probably make something up very complicated about saying, do you agree that we should wait another year before we decide this question one way or the other? You can do things like that. But this is it's a messy business to try to get into editing this very much.
Can we do the same thing we did with a flyer and take a sense of the meeting?
We could. The difference would be that we just instructed the school board to act in a certain fashion with a sense of the meeting. Taking a sense of the meeting and expecting the voters to know what that was is a little bit harder to do and might involve some publicity and other effort associated with it. So it's not quite as powerful a tool, but we can certainly do a follow-up sense of the meeting vote. We could. So let me start by asking, does someone have any suggestions, comments, or amendments to Article 8?
Sally Harrison. Based on the meeting that the Budget Committee had recently, I also was to understand not only or the demolition and sale, but potentially even donation of the building was a possibility. So it was going to be looked at from Mr. Aruda, I believe he made that suggestion in the last meeting. So my question is, in Article 8, this is an either or, demolition or sale, that would not address that particular scenario if indeed that building was going to be donated, and how to provide wording in Article 8 that would allow for that.
Go ahead.
So the article actually reads as surplus. So the school board could deem it as surplus, which we do any equipment non-used, and we can either donate or sell that property.
Thank you. That saves us an amendment. Further discussion or questions or comments or amendments? Hearing none, Article 8, yes. No, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I gotta look to the attorney, if it's appropriate to place a period after school district property, period. Take the extra language out. Declare it as surplus or not, and leave it at that. Because they can't do anything in the next year. We don't have the money to do anything. So all we would be doing in this article is deciding whether to declare it as surplus or not.
And to follow through with removal of the building. That's what it says.
Is there a petitioner for the article here?
Good question. Someone who wants to admit to being a petitioner? No.
What happens if Article 7 fails?
Well, honestly, Article 8 isn't going to do much of anything. Yeah, I mean, it's advisory. It suggests that if it got a majority, that people just want to get rid of it, but that doesn't mean they couldn't get rid of it through a donation that resulted in it being saved with enough donations to support it. So I guess what it would eliminate would be, or would discourage the school board from doing, would be keeping it on the school grounds and renovating it. That's what it says don't do. That's how I interpret it. Is that fair? And it's not like you couldn't come back next year, because nothing's going to be done that way in the coming year. It's not like you couldn't come back next year and vote the exact opposite. But it's very easy to reverse this. This is just an advisory suggestion. So I don't think this does a whole lot.
So if that committee comes back with a report that says we should do this, which is against this, we should
Point of order,
do
Mr.
that
Chairman.
with another vote.
Could you go to the microphone, please?
Yeah, in this case, I'll just repeat it. But yeah, please go to the microphone in the future. She was just asking if the committee came back with a recommendation that was in conflict with this, what does that mean? And the answer is it would just go on this warrant next year, and we could vote it in exactly the opposite direction of what this says, even if it was voted in favor this year. You know, if they came back with something really cool, somebody donated $1 million, we'd be all happy. So we have a suggestion from Mr. Brooks to put a period, which would eliminate reference to lead abatement completely from that article, which is why I would probably hesitate. But it simplifies it to simply put a period there too. So.
My only thought is you can't assume anything with how these votes are going to go.
Right.
And if you put lead abatement in there, there's no dollars in this article to do anything, and there's nothing in the budget to do anything. Is there any way to put add language that says, makes it clear to the voter that the result of this vote is advisory only?
Yeah, we've added that language in the past, a sentence at the end that said this is advisory only. I mean, that would be fine, but I don't know if that would change how people voted. Yes. Yeah, please pass down the microphone.
Hi, Joy Gray. The way I read this, that the sale would include the lead abatement. So if someone were to purchase it, they would be responsible for lead abatement. I thought that's the way it was explained at the budget committee meeting.
I don't think that's their intent.
Well, that was the point, was that people wouldn't really do that. That was, that the wording was.
Perhaps be a reason to put a period in. Yeah.
It actually brings up a point. So it would be, so if I read it again, to demolish sale include lead abatement. So money would be needed from the town or from the school board, school district, to abate the lead from the ground around the property after it's removed. But that, again, I'm not interpreting anybody else's argument.
So I'm going to apologize. I haven't run this very well. So, but it's your fault, you people. Article 8, if someone would like to put an amendment on the floor, we can vote it up or down. You can't get rid of it altogether. It's a petition article. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, I have a question. This is specific for the attorney. This petition warrant article was signed by 25 people in town, registered voters in the town. And they signed this based on the language that was in this warrant article. Now, if we go and change that, would that change? Do we know if that'll change the votes? Is that changing what they actually submitted and signed the petition article?
That's precisely why we're here, though. I understand what you're saying, but the same is true of the school board. They created the other warrant articles, and we're changing them. That is the power of this particular body. See, I think this whole thing's crazy. So that's a whole separate issue. You're absolutely right, and those are our fellow citizens. They want a particular language, but it is very much the power and the responsibility of this body to look at it and to improve upon it if we think we can. But it's a good point.
What does the attorney say?
That doesn't matter. I'm telling you that's all. Go ahead.
I think the spirit of the written petition was to find out the will of the voters, whether they want to save or, do something with the schoolhouse. Mr. Brooks was on the school board with us, and it's been pushed down the road for a while, and it needs to be fixed or something done with it to be structurally safe and sound.
So you'd leave Article 8 alone as far as our specific issue at this point?
I would, because it's strictly advisory.
Yeah.
So it's,
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I would like to add the words to it. I would like to add the words that it's advisory only. I don't think that changes anything. It's advisory only, but it lets the voter at least know that it's advisory. Otherwise, we'll have people saying, I voted this way and the town didn't do it.
Are you okay with that, Attorney Huddy? This article is advisory only would be the phrase at the end of Article 8.
Yes, that's fine.
So is there a second to that amendment? There is a second from everybody over here. And is there any further discussion with regard to that amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote on whether to add the phrase, "This article is advisory only," to Article 8. Please raise your hand if so. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. The article is now amended, and unless someone else has another amendment, it will appear on the ballot as amended with that additional phrase at the end. And with the $25,000 number, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the whole wrong place, with that phrase at the end of Article 8. Mr. Brooks, you telling me to hang on?
No amendment, I'm just waiting, I want to get something in before you close the meeting.
You got it, stay right there. So unless there's any further discussion, Article 8 will appear as amended on the warrant. Mr. Brooks, any final business to come before this meeting?
I would like to request a resolution of this body to condemn the SB2 process and join me in signing a petition to reverse it and go back to a traditional school meeting format of government for this body.
Look at the complete lack of expression on my face. Yeah, let's do that. Do I have a second to the resolution? Thank you, Ms. Nordland. Is there any further discussion on encouraging the town? I'll just simply put it that way. As far as signing petitions, people have to decide that. Simply say, have the minutes reflect that it's.
I'll put the petition together if everybody here will commit to signing.
But we're going to vote. All those in favor of a sense of the body that we would like to return to a traditional school district meeting, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Come on the Saturday after March 12th to the regular town meeting if you've not attended one, and you'll get to see and have a different experience. Plus, there's normally food. Ms. Nordland.
So I have a couple questions. One regarding Mike's proposal. Does that have to be in by tomorrow?
No, it's too late for that to be on the ballot for this year. It would be for next year that would appear.
All right, just checking. On page, Nicole Nordland, East Madison Road. Page 52, from the demographics of the schools, I was just curious if Madison had moved forward with getting the Albany kids to come to Madison. So they're not included in these numbers? No. Oh. And also, I've asked this in the past, so at some point in the last 20 years, because it seems to come into the book and out of the book and into the book and out of the book, the number of alternatively schooled and homeschooled children that are considered Madison residents. It is very helpful for me. I don't know if anybody else finds it helpful to look at that number because, for example, if there's 47 K through 6ers that are alternatively schools and 111, I mean, that's a big demographic. So I don't know why it keeps falling out of the book, but it used to be in the book, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and now it's not again.
Superintendent Whalen, can we expect that to be available to us?
We can make that happen, absolutely.
And just so I know, we have how long before we have to inform Conway, or have we informed Conway, with regard to any change in our contractual status as far as sending students to Kennett Junior and Senior High School, middle school?
The board took a vote at our meeting just prior.
Okay.
That we are going to send notification to Conway that we don't intend to continue the current contract with the middle or the high school, which means we are looking to negotiate, and we will send that off very shortly.
That's very helpful information. Thank you for letting us all know that. Is there any further business to come before the meeting? If not, a motion to adjourn. Everyone say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. My apologies for my sloppiness and